Welcome to Belated Binge, the re-binge podcast that does not take itself or the series too seriously. I'm Zach, and today is a special day because we are planting the seed for a new binge right here on the feed. Maybe my favorite TV show of all time. At least my favorite straight-up drama, hands down. Today, I'll grease the wheels by sharing the story of how I nearly missed out on, but then became obsessed with, Sons of Anarchy.
The Belated Binge Podcast.
Before we start any episode of this podcast, we'll have spoilers and adult language, particularly with Sons of Anarchy, which is full of adult situations and craziness that we get to discuss. Some shit is going to be downright uncomfortable. Use headphones as needed. If you've been listening to the Harry Potter binge, you might remember I kicked that off with telling you my Harry Potter story, when I got into it, why it took me so long, why I enjoy it, all of that, and I'm obviously going to kick off new binges the same way. So here's my Sons of Anarchy story. For starters, this series premiered in September of 2008 and ran until December of 2014. 7 seasons. It completed its full intended story arc. Kurt Sutter, the creator, said he intended on 7 seasons from the beginning, and that's what he got. And I didn't start watching the show until sometime after spring of 2018, about a decade after it began, and at least 4 years after it's run its full course on TV. I got into this show after I bought my own motorcycle that year. If you're listening to the Potter Binge, you probably heard me mention at some point or another that I have a motorcycle. I bought my bike in spring of 2018. It is a Harley Davidson, and when I was scrolling Netflix, I saw a show about bikes, bikers, and bullets that I'd heard a lot of good things about, and I decided to give it a shot, and I fucking loved it immediately. And that is unusual for me. Listen to my The Office story for more on that and how that typically goes, because normally it takes me a few tries on a new show before I, actually get into it. But once I do, I'm usually all in. And I don't remember a second after I hit play on the pilot of this show that I was not hooked. But I do want to reiterate, because someone listening to this who's not familiar with me or the podcast, hearing it for the first time, is probably thinking, oh, this douchebag watched Sons of Anarchy and went out to buy a Harley and act like a tough guy. I did not start watching this show until after that slice of two-wheel goodness was residing in my garage. This is also the point where I should throw this out into the world. I am not a member of any motorcycle organizations. You will hear some terms throughout this podcast that refer to a biker lifestyle, MC culture, and all of that. I do not have any personal experience as a member of any clubs or organizations. I do ride a motorcycle. I did go to a lot of motorcycle-type gatherings, particularly pre-pandemic, and I have met people who have worn a patch. But at no point do I want to come off as though I'm somehow claiming membership to any type of organization or playing one on this podcast. 1%, 99%, or otherwise. Now that shit is out of the way, why the hell did it take me so long to watch this amazing, chaotic, and frankly fucked up masterpiece? Well, that's actually kind of a funny story. So I was in college when SOA was taking over its piece of TV fame, and it started off completely off my radar. I didn't have a typical college experience for a white male dumbass American who went to college. My first couple of years, I was commuting like 45 minutes to campus, and I was a manager at a family business by my house. When I wasn't in class or driving, I was working, which ironically usually meant driving, because the family business was a pizza place, and I was often delivering pizzas. I spent a lot of time driving and playing with cars. That is another piece of my personality, I guess, that you probably wouldn't know about me. I used to be in like a car club and do a lot of stuff to modifications to my cars. And then I stopped spending so much damn money on my cars, and I got something that was a little bit more. I got a truck so that I would stop buying a bunch of car parts. Anyways, no, that's not why that's not why you're here. At this time, let's see here. We're rewinding back to college. I didn't know shit about SOA. I was working a lot. And I also had a girlfriend at that time that I was pretty serious about. And I'm going to spare you all the drama, but that business didn't make it much longer than that relationship. I honestly don't even remember which one crashed and burned first, but one thing I do remember is that as both were going through their respective disastrous endings around the same time, she had gotten really into this show she would go watch at her friend's apartment every week. I'd never heard of it, but it was called Sons of Anarchy. And apparently, the lead male character was super duper hot. Naturally, I didn't get super curious to go watch it when it made me think of that freshly failed relationship, and soon after that, my life got even crazier. I started working even more hours for less money just to try to survive. My last couple years in college, I ended up working at a radio station starting around 5 a.m. I'd go to class around 10. Then for a while, I'd work a different job. Eventually, it became that I was just going back to the radio station at 3, work until 7 or 10 or midnight, depending on the day. At some point, it became unusual if there was a day that I wasn't the one setting the alarm as the last person to leave and then turning it off in the morning as the first person to get there at the radio station, and class was still happening in between. And I was also doing other gigs on the weekends. Like, I would do some DJing stuff. I'd take odd jobs. I worked at a mall kiosk trying to buy people's jewelry. I worked at a car dealership detailing cars. I worked at a sporting goods store that my buddy's family owned, and that was pretty much my life until I finished college. It wasn't until after I graduated I was able to land a more, air quotes, normal work schedule. I still did the odd jobs, I took DJ gigs and all of that, but I had a pretty consistent shift at the station that helped me kind of stabilize my routine a little, and all during that time I was all in on sports and music. They were my job, they were my hobbies, and I don't think SOA ever even entered my mind again until years later. After I'd moved, I'd started a career in what I actually went to school for. I was engaged. We had our own little place, and we had Netflix, which was new to me. And I scrolled by Sons of Anarchy several times and only recognized the name of it from that ex-girlfriend from way back in the day at that point. So I didn't really think much of it. I was obviously well over the breakup, so there wasn't any kind of like weird visceral reaction. I wasn't against watching the show. I just didn't know anything about it except that she had once said that it was great. Then eventually I bought my Harley. And one day, while I was scrolling, I read the description of the show, and that's when I realized that it was a show about bikers. See, now, I grew up around motorcycles. My stepdad rode a Harley until he traded it for a crotch rocket. My mom rode a Yamaha Cruiser. We all rode dirt bikes. I would often get, my mom would take me to school on the back of her motorcycle. I would have my helmet and my book bag. And, we'd go camping with the dirt bikes, with doing trail riding. I tried my hand at racing motocross as a teenager. Spent a lot of time in the air and a lot of time in the dirt. And now that I have my own, motorcycle, it's kind of like a family thing that we get to do when there's time, because after I got mine, my stepdad and my mom both ended up getting Harleys again too. And ironically, there might not have been a person more excited when I finally bought one than my mother. She was stoked. My dad? Not my stepdad. My dad, my biological dad, not so much. He and I never bonded over motorcycles. We bonded over sports. So that's kind of what drew me to finally say, all right, let's see what people were so hyped about this show back in the day. And it blew my fucking mind. I watch it about once a year now, usually around January, February, when I'm itching to get back out on the bike and the weather is still just absolute garbage. It gives me a little taste of it. It kind of scratches the itch. But this past year, I refrained. I saved it for the podcast. So I can't wait to get back into it. Not my wife, though. She hates it. She never sat down and actually watched it with me, but every single time she would walk in the room when I had it on, it would be one of the most disturbing, just strange-ass sex scenes that happen from time to time in the show, and she's convinced that the whole show is just one big prison sex scene. But we haven't got to, well, any of those episodes. But we will, and I am super excited about it. Maybe not those particular scenes as much, but the show on the whole, super excited about. I love this show, and I can't wait for you to binge it along with me. Welcome to this belated binge of Sons of Anarchy.